Hello, my name is Niall McKay and welcome to Living with PSC, a podcast about the rare disease of primary sclerosing cholangitis. Now, PSC causes the bile ducts inside and outside the liver to become scarred, narrowed and eventually blocked, and leads to liver cirrhosis. In this podcast, we aim to dispel some of the myths about the disease.
From an anaesthetic point of view, our consultant is happy. He's no concerns at the moment.
Great.
From a surgical point of view, we're at the point where Mr. Hoshi is still working his way down to getting Niall's liver out.
Okay.
The new liver is all prepared and ready to go in. So we are making progress. Again, we haven't run into any issues at the moment.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Yes, thank you so much,
No,
Shauna.
no,
I really appreciate it. Okay, all right.
Okay,
Take care.
Marissa. Bye.
Bye.
Hello and welcome. My name is Niall McKay and I am your host, and I am sitting here with my wife and co-conspirator and filmmaking partner and partner in most things good. We sometimes get up to some mischief.
Most things good.
And we're doing a very unusual podcast today because we're talking about myself. We don't really like being on camera or in front of the microphone anymore.
All right.
But we will make a special occasion of this for you to tell you what it was like for me to go and have a transplant.
You've been doing this podcast for a while now, for a few years for PSC Partners, and you've never really talked about your own illness or your own history with the illness, which I think is a story too.
Yeah, no, I have a magic formula for doing the podcast. I talk about myself lots when I'm recording the podcast, and then I cut it all out before I publish it.
Just to give a little bit of a explainer of where we are. We're living in Ireland. 2019, we moved here from New York City. And you have been on and off the list for the last 4 years.
I know, it's been a very on and off again relationship. I would get cholangitis, end up in the hospital, then they were like, oh, you've definitely got to be on the list. And then I would kind of get home, start to recover, and then be like, oh, no, I don't think you should be on the list. You look great. PSC is a tricky illness. They call it one of the sort of black box illnesses. And the reason is that for PSC patients, it's very hard to know where they are. The route from being a little ill to death is very short at times. And the illness takes a very, very steep turn. So it's a very tricky one, tricky for doctors, and obviously it's great fun to have it as a patient because you just never know where you are.
It's a roller coaster.
Yeah, it is a little bit. So I think a couple of weeks ago, about on a Sunday, I was home, and what happened? I got a phone call.
At 6 p.m., you got a call from Shauna, who said that you are an alternate.
Which is a bit like being a sub. I was sort of the backup.
Yeah, exactly. You're the backup for it, but this was the first time that you were called in, and we were going to treat it as if you were getting your surgery. Although you were pretty convinced that you weren't going to get the surgery, get the transplant.
Denial, I think it's called. Denial, yeah. So
his middle name, folks.
My first name. So I went in, and actually I met Mary there, who I was just behind her coming in the lift. And basically what happens is when somebody goes for transplant surgery, they bring two people in. And the reason they bring two people in is because if something goes wrong or the first person is not ready for some reason, then they don't want the liver to go to waste because a donor has given the gift of life.
But you're not just sitting there on the sidelines. You're having to go do your blood tests, like the labs, everything to prep you up to the point of potentially being put to sleep with anesthesia.
Being transplanted that morning, they did chest x-rays and stuff. A lot of the workups I had done already. So I was ready to go. But yeah, there's a few other things that they do. One of the bizarre things they do is get you to blow into a breathalyzer. Now, I haven't drank since college or just after college, which is It's 30 something years ago. But anyway, so it was rather bizarre. And he says, oh, I'm sure you've done this before. And I was hopefully referring to people being stopped on the way home by the police. I've never blown into a breathalyzer in my life. So that was the first time.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And obviously it was clear. So, and that was, but I got a chest x-ray. Anyway, I was exhausted. I was up all night, basically.
Yeah. From 6 p.m. Onward, I don't think either one of us really slept. I probably slept more than you because I stayed in a hotel close to the hospital. And
any excuse, folks, any excuse.
Come on. Self-care, too.
I know.
For me.
So anyway, I went home the following day. I was really tired because I'd been up all night, and it's quite stressful to suddenly find yourself in that situation. Both of us are completely wrecked. Both of us go to bed. Both of us sleep through our phones ringing like 9 times. Until the police bang on the door. So I get up, and you know the way that's kind of in your dream? Like I thought it was in my dream, and I was like, what's that knocking?
The banging.
Yeah. So I get up, there's a cop at the door, Wicklow Gardaí. Only the second time in 30 years that the guards had to be called out, apparently. But we're very grateful for Yvonne for calling the guards on us. And he was like, are you Niall McKay? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, will you answer your phone? Vincent's are trying to get in touch with you.
It's a very abrupt and very startling thing to say and happen in the middle of the night at 1 a.m.
Well, my first thought was, God, I hope I haven't missed it.
Right, yeah.
So I called them immediately anyway, and they're like, yeah, get in here. Can't really remember that night. It was very late by the time I got in.
Can I take over? Yeah. It's the morning of your transplant, and it was a go. And you had 2 of the surgical team come in.
The wonderful Dr. Christus. We love Dr. Christus. Yeah.
And
we love them all. We love you all equally, but we love Dr. Christus.
And he came in to go over all the risks, right? And you were like, yeah, we know. We've been told about the risk. But I'm like, hang on. Let's go back, rewind, and just talk about that again.
Yeah.
And we had a really kind of deep conversation about this. Well, like what the risks are for this, what the possibilities are for anything happening in the surgical theater, and like the potential of death. In a large way, it was very comforting to be able to talk about that with Niall and to be able to just name it and say it and talk about what that might mean for him and what that might mean for me. It was an important moment for me.
I don't remember that at all.
So meaningful for me.
I don't remember it at all. But
like saying, I love you for the potentially last time. Right?
So it was before I had any drugs or anything like that.
Any drugs at all.
Yeah.
And they brought you down around 7:45 or 8 or so. They were a little bit late with it because a new surgical team had to come in, because they had just done Mary's.
There were no transplants for months, or very few for months, just the real emergency ones. And then there were a whole lot together,
Yeah.
The team was. But I remember walking down, your man appeared to say, oh, I'm bringing you down to the OR and to the operation theatre. And I was like, well, where's my wheelchair? Like, I had to walk down. And they're like, oh, you're going to love the view from the operation theatre. Now, the last thing you're thinking about is the view, to be honest. Like, at this stage, I had managed to not think about the actual operation itself at all. Like, I'd managed to not really engage with it. I just thought, well,
I mean, in terms of thinking of all the consequences of being on a liver transplant list.
I knew the odds were there's a roughly 10% chance that the operation won't go well and that you won't make it. And all of the time when people go in for transplant operations, they're really, really, really ill. And of course, then that lowers their chances of survival. So I sort of felt, probably wrongly, it's not 10% in my case. I got loads more percentage points.
Just for people to understand as well, like the Irish are, they come out as very sunny, seemingly positive, but they're very dark and very pessimistic when it comes to their own fate. So this is very hopeful that Niall felt this way.
And then we met this lovely Indian doctor, the anaesthetist called Shri.
Anesthesiologist. Yeah,
and she was very, very charming man, which I guess is a good trait. It's kind of like in our business, we've done a lot of films and documentaries and stuff. And the thing to do is never hire a grumpy sound person. They're going to be the person talking to your subject the most. Well, this was sort of the same principle, wasn't it?
You're comparing a sound person to the anesthesiologist, but yes, the anesthesiologist came out first. He introduced himself and he had a nice banter with us right before you walked over into the surgical theater, into the surgery room.
And at this stage, I'm terrified. And Tree is, don't worry, I got you, you're grand.
Yeah.
And then, thankfully, I don't remember anything.
Yeah, well, I do remember that the porter said that you were very, very nervous.
Really? Yeah. I would argue that it is logical to be nervous in this situation.
Yeah.
It's only logical, Spock.
Fair. Do you remember?
Well, no, you should take over from now because, I don't remember anything for the next 7 hours.
So then, say goodbye there in the front room of the surgery ward, and then I go to the nearby hotel, and then it's just holding in the possibilities of you might die on the surgery bed, you might live. You might be somewhere in between. So that was 8 a.m. in the morning when you went in. I got a call at noon, thankfully, from Shauna, the liver transplant coordinator, who updated me with what was happening. So she was telling me about how that they had to change the teams, the surgical teams, right? And have like whole new players come in, basically, like almost like the football team coming in with
just one team wasn't good enough for me. I needed two. This guy is so complicated.
No, the first team was exhausted from from Sunday or Monday's liver transplant. Anyway, she was telling me that they started late because of that, to get this new team up to speed, and that the first thing that happens, right, is disconnecting. And these are my words, right? These are not Shauna's words at all. But for me, it was disconnecting the cables from the old liver, right? So that's the arteries, the veins, the bile ducts, from everything around it, taking it out of its place, removing it, and that takes a while, apparently.
Yeah.
As you can imagine.
They take your whole stomach out and they put it on a table beside you, basically, don't they?
I have no idea. Is that what they do?
Well, I think they have to sort of, because they need to root around there to get the other liver in,
Well, one thing, and this is, again, a very non-medical way of describing this, but something that Dr. Costas had said beforehand was then figuring out the connections between where your old cables are that are remaining in your body and where the cables for this new liver go, and what to prioritize in terms of the veins, the arteries, or the bile ducts. And then making the decision to the connections between the bile ducts align more. So we're going to start those first. Yeah. That is my very non-physician surgical description of this.
Yeah, and I actually don't know whether they take your stomach out and put it on a table. I just made that up. They have to move it, though. I know that.
In our heads, we had this sort of cartoon version of what we think.
Yeah, from John Crowley, who's come up with a cartoon film about the whole thing. But yeah, my surgeon was Dr. Hoti, who was really, really great. The surgical team were just at St. Vincent's are just amazing. They do quite a lot of transplants, and I know Dr. Hoti has done a lot. It's good to have an experienced team. Well, not that I remember anything, because I was out of my mind on whatever at the time.
Well, you're here and you're thriving, and you're full of vitality, so that's the good news of it. But
I don't remember the specifics.
I do. Yeah.
So what was the next call you got then?
So the next call was exactly around the time that Shauna had said she'd call. So she called back around 4:30 and said they're done. And it went well. And that was the moment of being able to just allow myself to break down and say, oh, I don't have to hold all these possibilities now. We're at the good, the one that we had hoped for. That it all went well. And the surgery team are very happy. And I think that was, for her, the most significant thing to say, that they're happy with the surgery.
Yeah. I'm getting emotional here, so I'm just sort of kind of holding it in because, anyway. And what did you do in the meantime? Were you watching The Great Bake Off?
I was trying to work, if you can believe it.
Oh, yeah. For those nice people in New York. There's another story there.
No, we signed an NDA. We can't talk about that one.
I never signed anything. But yeah, there's another story there. But anyway, yeah, for those nice people in New York. Okay, so you were just working all day, basically.
I was attempting to, for sure.
Yeah.
I was attempting to but I was also reaching out to all our friends and family, everyone who knew about your illness and who Niall would have wanted to have told about this. I also needed support for myself to just like have people understand this is what we're going through right this moment. And your cousin Allison came over to the hotel to have lunch with me and just to hold me so we could both kind of support each other.
Nice.
We were afraid.
Thank you, Allison. Yeah, nice.
The next call I got was from a voice around 7 p.m. that was hoarse, and it sounded like a 91-year-old man had called me. And I knew it was the hospital, but I thought, oh, it's the wrong number from the hospital, or they like got the, I thought
the
like
senility department. Hello, senility for Marissa Aroy.
And it was this voice in a very croaky old man voice. Special liver delivery. Special liver delivery. And I started to laugh and burst into tears because it was Niall. And the nurse had given him the phone to call me. He had told the nurse to call me. And this is the first thing he is saying to me coming out of major transplant surgery.
I think I was doing pretty well at that stage, wasn't that? That was the
Well, you were off your mind.
Yeah.
Morphine.
Oh, yeah. No, I was definitely, which is a whole other story. I was intubated for a lot of it, so for the operation. So once they intubated me. So I wake up, I've got like a super highway of veins and a huge big clamp, scissors like clamp thing sticking out of my neck. And I've got a catheter in, intubated still, oxygenated through my nose. There's a tube in, two tubes coming out of my stomach.
That are drains.
Yeah, drains. And it's funny the things you're worried about, because the thing I was worried about when I went into the operation, when I was sitting on the table there, was that I hadn't gone to the bathroom that morning. So I hadn't gone for a number 2. And I was wondering, oh God, it's a mess and I haven't done this. And how are they going to do? So I woke up in the ICU. Something I didn't know about. If you watch the Selena Gomez documentary, the same thing happens to her. It's very common that people have a bad experience with the medication. So Selena, as you may know, had a kidney transplant due to lupus, which when you're in it and you wake up and you're in pain after a transplant, I mean, I know it is working, but it doesn't feel like it's working. Like you can still feel quite a bit of pain. So you're on a lot of steroids and you're also on pain medication. So it's very common for people to have a bad experience on those drugs. Time was not passing for me. So a minute seemed like an hour and an hour seemed like a day and a day seemed like a month. So for me, being in the room for 30 minutes, that felt like days to me. And then you're also in pain. And then you're also sort of hallucinating, there is not hallucinating full people or stuff, but there's, and of course, one of the things that happens is that with those drugs, like you're very lucid. I mean, you're batshit crazy, but you're really lucid. Your thinking isn't dulled at all, as it would be with some things. It's very, very sharp. So you think your thinking is good, but it's not.
And how did there was one nurse in particular who really helped you through this time period, which for you was the most challenging, because obviously you were awake and you were dealing with all of the pain and all of the ramifications of having been literally stabbed.
There was a nurse called Kate, right, from Portmarnock, who was just like an angel. Like, they were all good, I have to say. And then, do you remember the guy's name as well? I know eventually he got angry with me, but I didn't mind. He was just like, I kept trying to pee with the catheter in, which was really painful. He was like, Niall, stop doing that. And I just couldn't stop myself. And then there was one nurse who was telling me to go to sleep, which wasn't very helpful, I have to say. And I'm sure she was really great as a nurse and doing all the right nurse things and all that kind of stuff.
That was the most challenging time of the time period.
Because I was going through that stuff, and it can't be easy to be with somebody who's in that state of mind either,
I have to talk about that time. It was the next day after your surgery, and the physiotherapist came in and she took over and said, motion is medicine. Let's get you up. Let's get you walking. Let's see how you're doing. And they unplugged you from...
Which is music to my ears, because I am also a person who would be... The nuns used to call me constantly jigging. I was probably hyperactive as a kid, but I'm always moving, right?
Yes, you
So
are.
I was delighted with this, yeah. Because the more uncomfortable I was lying there, I couldn't do it. But moving, even if I hurt like hell, I felt much more comfortable moving. Yeah.
Which you do now even.
Yeah.
So they unplugged you from all of the machines, got you a portable oxygen tank that one of the nurses held you by the underarms and literally walked you down the ward in front of all of the ICU nurses and patients and those who were paying attention, and the nurses who saw you went, yay, and
Got a big clap, yeah.
And it was the most joyous moment, because it was that marked for me that you are going to get well.
Yeah, because I think before that, my liver numbers started to go up. They were worried, I think. It's quite normal after an operation. They can go wrong, obviously, where my liver numbers were going in the wrong way.
And we should mention as well that you had some issues with your lungs.
Oh, I had an infection on my lungs as well. Yeah. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah. Just a small one. But again, they said that's normal because of you're lying down, you're not moving. But the big thing for me on the walk was that my Crocs were a huge hit. I have a big pair of red Crocs, and almost all the surgical teams wear Crocs, don't they?
Yep. Crocs are in. Crocs are trendy.
Yeah. Even for old people. But then the minute they took out the catheter, and they were happy for me, I was getting up and down to the toilet every 20 minutes.
That was your first kind of big exercise, right?
Yeah, and they were good. They were really good about it. I remember Kate again saying, it was a Friday or whatever, saying, I think we're going to get you down to St. Bridget's. And I was very, very relieved, because I knew if I was going down to the ward that I wasn't that bad.
You were in ICU for roughly 3.5 days. Well, just how it felt like a really long time for you.
Yeah. No, it felt like months.
Right.
I thought I was in the ICU for months. And I remember poor Dr. Audrey Dillon coming down, and she had such a look of sympathy in her eyes, because I was talking about malignant forces around me at the time. I guess I'll talk about this because it's one of the things I haven't heard about. So I was there and time wasn't passing. So I did have a little bit of post-op psychosis or whatever.
They called it delirium, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Oh, delirium. Yeah. I was trying to pray or do anything to distract myself. It wasn't really working. And I had one of those thoughts where it's like, okay, so you're going to die. And I felt really sad for you after dragging you over to this little island to sea swim every morning and then leave you. And I felt sad, obviously, for the people who I know love me. But then past that, and I'm not saying I'm brave, but at that point, I did not feel afraid.
You didn't feel afraid of death.
Yeah, but I was just sort of like, okay, if I die, I die. I had a good life. And because time wasn't passing, I realized that time was elastic or relative in Einstein's terms. And I was very aware that the prize was life. That life is the ultimate, that having life, that we're so lucky that we have life. But then I had a terrifying thought. What if I don't die? What if I stay in this state? And that was terrifying. I got you on the phone and you came down and you said to me, I'll walk you out of here right now.
If that's what you want.
And you see, the whole thing of that was that you just saying that stopped the eternity of the feeling that I was having because of the drugs. Because if you were going to walk me out, even though you knew you weren't, and I probably knew you weren't either, but if you were prepared to do that, then it wasn't eternity anymore. And that mere fact made me feel better, and made me feel grateful for being alive,
Wow.
When you're in that delirium state in the hospital, there's like, I don't know, you can feel people all around you. You're really bugging out. Like, some people see ghosts. I could feel these sort of beings around me now. They might have been just people in the hospital. I thought I could feel everybody who died in the hospital ever at one stage.
No, I remember. I
Oh.
remember you telling me that you could feel almost like the ghosts of St. Vincent's past.
Yeah. And the thing is that wasn't scary. Like, there's nothing they can do that would make any difference. They've got to give you the medication because you won't get well or survive if you're on.
They've got to give you the medication, you mean?
Yeah, they've got to give it to you anyways.
Yeah.
There's nothing they can do that would not make it happen when you're going through an operation. And then once you're through it, of course, time that never ended for me is an instant in my mind now, because it's a memory. It would have helped me if they had talked about it, though.
About what being post-transplant in the ICU would feel like.
For me, it would have been better to know that experience. And that's why I'm saying it here. So if you go through this, you'll know it'll pass. And it does always pass. And then the rest, I was in St. Bridget's ward. They're wonderful. What do you remember of that time?
You're just healing. You're literally just healing. You have drains in you. And then eventually you stopped leaking.
I know, yeah.
I just remember that it was a big thing for you to take the catheter out. And that meant the beginning of you kind of flourishing really well and not just walking to the bathroom, which was a big feat when you think about it. You think about the fact that you need abdominal muscle and upper body muscle to scooch out of a bed, get on your Crocs, and then head over to the bathroom.
But I kind of just haunted the halls of the hospital. I just walked as much as I possibly could.
You did. I mean, you had begun to do that, to walk the halls of the hospital, but Niall became known as Mr. Congeniality.
There was one or two nurses who were calling me that.
But you were doing really well in there. I mean, very slowly things were starting to be taken off, like the drains from the surgical site, the 2 drains, one drain and then the next. And you got out at the time that they said you would get out, 2 weeks.
I know, I've been doing really well, and I've been walking a lot. I go down to the beach every morning and I walk for a couple of miles.
But you're still feeling some stuff.
Yeah. No, there's still quite a bit of pain, and I think...
Sorry, describe the pain. Like, what is that pain?
Well, just in the sort of liver, stomach area on the right-hand side, particularly after I eat. Well, look, whether your stomach was actually on a table or not, it was out of your body. So I think there's a lot of settling and stuff that has to happen.
There's also a different type of transplant that they do here in terms of how they deal with PSC patients, right?
And do you remember the name of that? I was avoiding that very question because I couldn't remember the actual name of the procedure.
Can't remember the name of the procedure.
But they connect your they connect your bile duct to your stomach as opposed to your bile duct connecting your bile duct.
No, not to the stomach, to the lower. What's lower from the duodenum? The jejunum.
The jejunum.
Yeah, I made that word up. I have no idea. It's something. It's around.
Don't do this at home, folks. Do not take out your jejunum.
DIY.
You might get arrested.
DIY transplant for exposing his jejunum to
the duodenum. There's the duodenum, right? But there's
duodenum,
yeah. You say tomato.
Anyway, so there's a different type of liver transplant that they do for PSC patients, so that in the hopes that one doesn't get recurring PSC.
Well, it's small wonder why Marissa was not able to remember the name of the procedure, because it's called hepatocoagulopathy. Usually, the bile duct is connected to the bile duct of the donor liver. However, with primary sclerosing cholangitis, this is not possible because the bile duct might be diseased. In this situation, a loop of the small bowel is joined to the donor bile duct to allow the bile to drain into the small bowel. This is called hepatocoagulopathy. We are now 8 weeks after the transplant. It's been an interesting journey, and really the best that I could do was keep moving all the time. So I would have my little app set on my watch, and I started at 1 mile a day, and I tried to work my way up to 3 miles a day before I left the hospital, which I did. And since I came home, I have been doing, 6 to 7 miles a day, just walking gently. And it hasn't really taken that long to build up some strength. And it's been very important for me anyway to keep moving. And when I came home at first, I was in extreme pain really, and I was in a lot of pain when I ate. And there was an awful lot of swelling. My stomach is still very tight at times where it feels like it's sort of distended, and still I have to be careful about the amounts that I eat. And I think the big lesson for me really has been that a liver transplant is sort of swapping one illness for another. And in fact, after 5 weeks back, my bloods started to go up. And fortunately, I think Vincent's Hospital has been watching the numbers very, very carefully. So as my ALT numbers, which are the liver scores, doubled 1 week basically. So she brought me in for a biopsy, which meant that I was given an ultrasound to look at the hepatic arteries and make sure that they were okay, that there was no restrictions going on there or constrictions. And they all looked good. So I had a chance to look at this wonderful new liver that my donor gifted me.
What was that like? Could you connect what you were seeing on the screen with what was inside you?
And I felt quite emotional, so maybe I did connect it in that way.
What was making you emotional about it?
Well, just the fact that I had this new working liver. So then I went down actually for the biopsy. They give you a mild anesthetic or...
Biopsy is basically a syringe.
Yeah, they put a needle into your liver and take a bit out and then examine it under a microscope.
Yeah.
And what they're examining it for is rejection. And what they found was some inflammation, but not rejection. And there's kind of a scoring system they use between 0 and 9, but 0 to 2 is good and 9 is bad.
Okay.
And I'm at a 3, which means that there's some inflammation, but not actual rejection going on. What happens is that in these early stages, it's much better that they figure out any kind of rejection issues that are going on now. It's important that they get on top of this stuff really early.
She was almost apologetic to you that she had kept you in the hospital. Yeah,
no, I'm delighted. I've been looked after so well. When I first went to Vincent's, they didn't have a lot of staff at the time. The whole HSC system was under pressure, This is before the pandemic, so it was really understaffed, and it was, they were running to catch up a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now I feel like there's kind of adults are in charge, and there's a real feeling of just competence about the place, and it's not just me. Like, I know that some of the staff feel it as well, and definitely patients feel it.
There's certainly in the sense that as well, when the doctors introduce themselves, for instance, they introduce themselves by their first name, and that's the tone that they set.
But that, and also the fact these are all people who have experience in big liver clinics around the world, like both Dr. Omar El-Sharif and Dr. Audrey Dillon were at Birmingham, and they have a very big liver clinic there. And also Dr. Zita Galvin was at Toronto. That's one of the world centers for PSC. There's a doctor there, Dr. Gideon Hirschfield, and he's one of the world experts and one of the people we talk to often on this podcast. He'll explain things very simply. So I think it's an important change in medicine. It's an important change that needs to happen in Ireland across the board, because I've experienced people who can be very arrogant, who don't know an awful lot. One of the things I really like about St. Vincent's now is that the opposite is true. That's really comforting, to know that they're willing to explain it to you, that they're willing to talk you through it.
But you're still kind of on this journey, right? So the first 3 months are what for you as a liver transplant patient?
It's difficult because I have to keep restraining myself because I have energy. And I haven't had energy for years. You do not need to go out. It's okay. You don't
need to mow the lawn.
The other thing that I've got to bear in mind as well is that I am immunocompromised. So I need to be extra careful when I'm out. Wear a mask. There's a lot of COVID in the community at the moment, even though it's full summer. So
it's hard to kind of wrap my head around the fact that they are trying to bring your immunity down so that your body accepts the liver versus what we all try to do. Yeah, the danger you're in of getting an infection is very high.
Yeah, well, I think your immune system is like, hey, dude, this is my house. What's this liver doing here?
To Francesca, the liver? That's my name for the new liver.
Yeah, I'm nervous of giving it a name for some reason. I'm not sure why. Maybe I'm afraid it'll take over.
The humor of your liver will affect you.
Well, have you noticed a personality change in me?
I have not.
So no luck there then. You're stuck with the old one.
We'll see.
I do have to say that I'm very grateful for the donor. This is the gift of life that somebody has given us.
Are you gonna thank the donor?
Oh, absolutely. When and the donor's family, when I get a chance, of course I will. Yeah, they recommend that you leave it as 3 to 6 months or something like that, and then you write them a letter. So here we are, folks. I'm exercising every day. For the rejection, I did ask Dr. Dillon, was there anything I could do to not reject the liver? Yoga or green vegetables or Ayurvedic medicine or anything like that? And she was like, no, dude, no. Keep taking the tablets.
Keep taking the tablets. Right.
And that's exactly what I've been doing, which is taking the medication. And they have got my rejection activity score down to a number 2, which is where we want to be. And also you'll be glad to hear that my pain has subsided substantially. So I am doing pretty well. I still have some tightness around the stomach and I'm still taking the steroids. So sleep is a little difficult. There is some hair loss. They say it'll grow back.
We're just taking one day at a time.
And very grateful for the day. This is it. This is the gift of life. You know, we have to be mindful of. And also we have to be mindful that PSC at the moment is an incurable disease and an untreatable disease, except with the liver transplant. But I have full confidence in we will have some treatments coming down the pike in not such a long time, you know, if not full-on cures. So
there's hope.
There is hope. There's definitely hope.
You want to thank your wife?
Oh, I do want to thank my wife. Yes, yeah. I want to thank my beautiful and intelligent and wonderful wife, Marissa.
Of course. Obvious. Bob.
Oh. And I think, folks, one of the things that we forget is the effect these illnesses have on our partners and our loved ones and our families. And certainly for me, and I know other people handle it slightly differently, but it's tempting for me to hold Marissa almost at arm's length because I feel like it gives me control, which of course it doesn't. And also I don't want to upset her. And I'm only really learning how to be present with both my feelings about the illness and with telling Marissa and keeping her in the loop as to what's going on. If I'm feeling pain, I often don't want to talk about it. Then you're just sort of cranky. It's much better that I turn around and say, look, I'm experiencing this at the moment.
But it goes both ways as well, that I didn't want to share my fears or my worries about you or how I was worried about you. And so then we're both just kind of keeping our feelings from each other, although we're both feeling them. And that's no good.
I don't feel them. I put them off. It was Woody Allen that said, I don't have feelings, I have tumors.
Right. Yeah.
Somebody asked me the day before I went in for the biopsy how I was feeling about it. And I was like, feeling about it? I'm not feeling anything. I'm packing. I'm trying to make sure that I have my chargers. And then, of course, Friday evening, after I was coming down off all the meds and sore, then I felt it.
Then the emotions come in.
So I have to thank Avril for popping in a pack of chocolate biscuits at that stage.
Sometimes that's all you need, right?
I scoffed those biscuits. They went down in one.
Thanks, Avril. Thank you. You were telling me that we needed to wrap this thing up, and then you just go on and on.
Can't shut me up. Well, thank you very much for listening in. Anything else you'd like to add?
Marissa Aroy, signing off.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week, folks. While I got my transplant at St. Vincent's University Hospital in Dublin, in Ireland, this podcast was brought to you courtesy of PSC Partners Seeking a Cure, which is a US nonprofit. Its aim is to drive research to identify treatments and a cure for primary sclerosing cholangitis, while providing education and support for those who are impacted by this rare disease. This podcast was also brought to you by the word hepatocoagulopathy and by the number 2, because that's what you want your rejection activity index to be at, is a number 2 when you leave the hospital. But first, as Jessica Travis pointed out in her podcast, it takes a village to do a transplant. And if I may thank some of those people in the village who made it possible. Drum roll, please. So I'd like to thank my liver donor and their family, most of all, and my wife, Marissa, and Dr. Dillon, Dr. Galvin, Dr. El Sharif, Dr. Iqbal, Dr. Christos, Dr. Kostas, my surgeon, Dr. Hoti, and my anesthesiologist, Dr. Shree. And I'd like to thank the wonderful ICU team, especially Kate and Aaron. I'd also like to thank the transplant coordinators, Yvonne, Jennifer, Shauna, Jane, Susie, and Anna, and the registrar, Matt, and Amberley. And if I may, the people who pick you up in the middle of the night, who dust you down, who look after you, often get little recognition, so I'm going to give them a brief thanks as well. So I'd like to thank Dawn, Atif, Louise, Ryan, Jean, Matt, Trixie, Sharon, Rena, Christina, Anjali, Shyaman, Edwin, Sharon, Anoa, Miti, Aoife, Neetu, Emma, Anita, Bhavada, and Gabby. And if I didn't mention your name, please forgive me. I am no less grateful to you. Thank you very much. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this week. For more information about PSC and for a list of people and topics we'll be covering in the near future, please go to www.pscpartners.org. That's www.pscpartners.org. PSC Partners is a non-profit organisation dedicated to providing education and support to primary sclerosing cholangitis patients. There is information and resources on the website. There is a conference once a year. There is a private Facebook group that you can also join. Also, please join our patient registry. This is an anonymous database that provides research support to the medical community who are researching this disease. Thank you very much for listening.